Hey, I'm YouTube and welcome back to a new video with Rams fan YT. In today's video, we will be going over my score predictions for this upcoming week of football. We've got the opening day of a championship, National League North and South, and the EFL Cup first round ties as well. So a lot of exciting games to be looking forward to. I am well and truly looking forward to this season starting. I'm optimistic about Derby doing well this season. I think we may have a solid season. I'll have my full championship predictions on this evening before the evening kickoff tonight of Birmingham versus Ipswich. But overall, I'm very encouraged by what Derby has done. But there's a lot of other good teams in the championship this season. It's certainly one of the hardest ones I think it's been in absolute years. Let's get straight into these games with tonight's game of Birmingham versus Ipswich, shall we? Well, one team came down from the Premier League and one team got promoted from League One last season. Now, normally, on paper, you would then back the team which got relegated from the Premier League last season in the form of Ipswich. However, both of these clubs have huge budgets with the parachute payments for Ipswich and the American owners of Birmingham heavily investing in the club. It's certainly one which seems to me to seem quite an even game, actually. I'm going to go with a 2-2 draw here. I can't quite pick a winner between the two of these, but I think it'll be an entertaining game nevertheless. Charlton Athletic versus Watford. Charlton have come back to the championship after a fair few years' absence now. It seems to be, and I'm really impressed by some of the transfers that they have made so far. And they're up the valley hosting Watford in this one. I'm going to back the Addicts to win this one by 1-0. I think it'll be a close one, but I do tend to think on the opening day of the season, home advantage plays a huge part in it because it's still sort of finding your feet from pre-season. It's suddenly you have to up your game a bit more, and a home advantage can really provide a lot of help. Coventry City versus Hull City. I feel like Hull might be in a bit of a poor season this season. I think it will be a bit of a struggle based on last season and the transfer embargo they've got. We're up against Coventry City, who reached the playoffs last season, so I think I'd be a fool to not back Coventry in this one. 2-1 to Coventry City. Southampton versus Wrexham. I don't rate Wrexham that highly. You may know that by me watching your channel for a while. I think I always think that there's got to be a ceiling at some point. And I think this may be it. And they are up against a team which is just admittedly was horrendous in the Premier League last season, but they are a different beast altogether in the championship. I'm going to go 5-0 to Southampton here. Home advantage for the Saints, and Wrexham coming into an early day shock in the start of the championship campaign. Middlesbrough versus Swansea City at the Riverside. Very interesting one. I think both of these teams have got the capability maybe to get into the playoffs on paper. Both of these teams' squads are really strong. Swansea have made some lots of good acquisitions over this summer. Less so in the case of Middlesbrough, but they had a decent team last season. I'm going to go quite an even game with this one. 1-0 to Borough. Norwich City versus Millwall. Another two teams which could potentially have an eye on playoffs this season. I think it is well open this season. I think there's about 12 teams, probably 12 to 14 teams, which could probably reach playoffs this season. That's the beauty of a championship in a sense, and why I'm grateful it's back. I am going to back Norwich for this one. Home advantage at Carrow Road. 2-1 to the Canaries. Oxford United versus Portsmouth. Both of these potentially could struggle this season. Being a bit smaller teams in the league. However, I do think Portsmouth are a team that I think will be dark horses this season. I won't reveal entirely where I think they will finish. You'll have to watch my predictions video tonight for that. But I do think that Portsmouth are going to be a bit of a surprise package. And I'm going to back Pompey to win this one. 2-0 against Robert's men. Queen's Park Rangers versus Preston North End. Queen's Park Rangers have lost Fuentes and have got a new fella in from we've done well in Brazil and Uruguay and stuff like that, but it's something that we'll have to see how transferable that is in England. Preston have had some decent transfer moves already. I think they've removed some of the dead wood and are a solid team, but I think it is a bit of a struggle at the moment. I'm going to back QPR for this one, 2-1. Stoke City versus Derby County. Now, Derby at the moment, I think, have got a huge potential. I think they're a team that should definitely go in places this season. My one issue with Derby at the moment is that we are not fully strength, and we are a team in terms of we got the players, but a lot of the players which would push us up the table are currently injured. You like Sophia Ajimang, which we brought in, Salverson, Langas, some of them players which I think could be absolutely pivotal with moving us up the table, and even people like Matt Clark and Owen Beck and David Ozo, they're not likely, I think, to be starters coming this Saturday anyway. So I do think it's going to be a difficult one, and Stoke's always a difficult place to go. I'm glad we're going in summer because I wouldn't want to be going on a cold and wet and rainy Tuesday night. But it is a hard place to go over Bet365, and I do think Stoke have one of them teams that can cause a bit of issues for Derby. Some people see it as a bit of a local derby. I don't personally, but I think there has been some tension in the past between the two clubs. I'm going to back the Potters to win this one, 2-1. But I'm hoped to be proven wrong. West Bromwich Albion versus Blackburn Rovers. Blackburn Rovers losing Eustace and replacing Valerian Ishmael. Interesting choice. West Brom were certainly knocking on the door playoffs last season. As were Blackburn. I don't necessarily think it'll be the same for either side this season. I mean, West Brom could well be somebody knocking on the doors of playoffs. It could well go even better. I don't feel the same with Blackburn, though. I feel the thing with Blackburn is a lot of their squad's been wrenched out, and their manager was gone as well. But I am still going to Blackburn for this one, despite my negativity towards that club at the moment. I am going to, because Blackburn normally do quite well on the opening day. That is a tradition that they have going quite a fair few years now. 2-0 to Blackburn Rovers. Sheffield United versus Bristol City. I think we may see Bristol City capitulate a bit this season. I think we're going to see them being a bit more of their usual self. Philosophy and Manning. They've got a difficult opening game against Sheffield United at Bramall Lane. It's a really difficult one, this one. And I'm going to back the Blades to win this one fairly comprehensively. 3-0. Peterborough United versus Luton Town. So League One have had their opening games. I don't want to read too much into any of them, to be honest. I think that's a naive thing to do, to be honest. And you look at both of these teams. Luton are a team on paper that you well and truly expect to be promoted. They won their opening game. Peterborough were very mediocre last season. They lost their opening game. I do actually think that we might see a bit of an even game, actually, at London Road. It's still early doors in the season. I'm going to go with a 1-1 draw here, which is a bit of a shock, I think, for Luton. But they need to find their feet at this level. So a few shocks to the system early doors. There's nothing wrong with that because you can easily recover it. It's just about getting accustomed to the style of football of this level. Reading versus Huddersfield Town. Both of these teams look likely to reach playoffs last season at various points and both fell away. It's at the Majeski. I think Huddersfield are going to do decently this season. I just think travelling to Reading may be quite difficult. Now, Reading did lose their opening game of the season and Huddersfield did win. And Huddersfield won fairly comprehensively, actually. They're one of the best opening days of the season. But I do think Reading will win this one. 2-1 to the Royals. I can't entirely place my finger on it exactly. I just think I don't expect Reading to be in a relegation picture this season. And I think they could maybe have a playoff push. I'm not convinced either. But you've got to go in the mindset you can win every game, don't you? AFC Wimbledon versus Lincoln City. If you saw my League One predictions, I thought that Lincoln City were going to be a dark horse, and I thought that Wimbledon will be relegated. So it's not really a surprise that my predictions got the Imps to run out as 2-0 winners, to be honest. And I do think Wimbledon, I don't think are quite ready yet for League One football. I'm going to be brutally honest. Barnsley versus Burton Albion. Burton Albion started incredibly well this season. They started with a win up against Mansfield Town, and now up against Barnsley. I think it's always difficult because you think Burton are going to be involved with a relegation scrap. But what happens if they're not? What happens if they turn up for the books and completely shock people? I think Barnsley are going to be mid-table. I think it's going to take a while for Hurahan to adjust. Now, he did win his opening game. Admittedly, it was quite a difficult one, but it was against a Plymouth side, which are adjusting to this level as well. I'm going to go with a 0-0 draw here. Burton are a hard team to beat, and they're defensively always a team which focus on that attribute that they have. Bolton Wanderers versus Plymouth Argyle. Bolton will be wanting both teams will actually be wanting a reply to losing their opening game, but especially I feel Bolton, who have got lofty aspirations. But it was one of them ones that had a lot of expectations probably coming into it. Now, they were up against Stockport, so it was always going to be a difficult opening game. And they're at home this time against Plymouth. A long way from Plymouth to Bolton. Of course, the fans will travel, but even so. I'm going to go 4-0 Bolton Wanderers. Exeter City versus Blackpool. I'm sorry, I just don't see Exeter doing it overly well this season. Around about where they're currently sitting in 19th, which I know it's the first game, so the table does not matter at all. But that's where I roughly think they're going to finish. And you look at Blackpool, and I think it's a very mid-team. Probably finish from roughly where they are now, actually, as well, in 14th. But I do think they will win some games this season, Blackpool, and I'm going to back them to win this one. 3-1 to the Tangerines. Leyton Orient versus Wigan Athletic. Both of these teams may have an expectation level of getting into some sort of playoff form. I think maybe both won't, to be brutally honest. I think this will be quite an even game, and it'll be an exciting 0-0 draw, because I don't think any of them will be willing, either side will be willing to concede. Mansfield Town versus Doncaster Rovers. Doncaster, I thought, and I'm still maintaining because it's still early doors, are going to do quite well this season, to be honest. And they did win their opening day of the season. And they're now up against Mansfield, who lost their opening day of the season. There's a very high chance that Mansfield could well provide an upset in this one, I think, because at the moment there may be a side that I don't think many people are backing for much. I think both of these sides are actually quite good. I'm going to go with a 1-0 draw. It's a really difficult one because I think both of these ones have huge potential. These sides have huge potential to go to that next level. Northampton Town versus Bradford City. Bradford City are a team, I think they'll stay up, but I think they have got a bit lofty expectations at the moment. But I think Northampton are going to be dire. I think they're going to be the worst side in this league. And so I'm going to obviously back Bradford for the win with this one. 2-1 to the Bantams. Stevenage versus Rotherham United. Well, if Steve Evans was still at Rotherham, which he isn't, that would have been a bit of a tasty game. Alas, now there doesn't seem to be much riding on it. Stevenage on their opening day looks slightly more better than Rotherham, but both won their opening day. And I think it's going to be a relatively even game coming into this one at Lamex, a 1-1 draw. Wycombe Wanderers versus Stockport County. Wycombe had an eye on the title at one point last season and fell away. Stockport made a late charge for it and did not make it. Both of these will probably be wanting to be doing extremely well this season. So it's a tasty game early doors, so to speak, at Adams Park. I think Stockport win this one by 3-1. Notts County versus Salford City. Both of these teams are, in a sense, teams that have expectations of playoffs, maybe. And I think both of these teams won't make them this season, I'm going to be honest. I think they're going to have a bit of a flat season. I think with this one, I think Salford are going to run out as 3-1 winners. I'm just praying on Notts' downfall, as I ever am. And be helpful if the team who had atrocious start of the season put it right with a 3-1 win, wouldn't it? Tranmere Rovers versus Shrewsbury Town. It was a boring 0-0 draw between Shrewsbury and Bromley for the opening game of the season in their regards. And I think it's one of the ones that Shrewsbury may take a little time to adjust. I think it's going to be a close one here. I think both of these teams, I don't think, play that attractive football at the moment. I'm going to go a 1-0 win for Shrewsbury, a proper hit and run style thing. Barrow versus MK Dons. Paul Vaughan had a pretty boring start to the season, to be honest, and they drew up against Oldham Athletic, the league's new boys, so to speak. And to be honest, I wasn't that impressed. Now, I didn't watch the game, so I couldn't fully tell you, but in terms of looking at some of the match stats or whatever, they didn't really hit any they weren't very good in front of goal. They didn't really have many shots on target. They're up against a Barrow side who lost their opening game and will be looking for bounce back. And I think at home, I think Barrow have this possibility to do so. 2-1 to Barrow. Bromley versus Barnet, two teams which were recently in the National League, with Barnet getting promoted last season and Bromley the season before last. I think both of these teams will have an unexpectedly good campaign, so to speak. And it's both teams are in London as well, so not too far to travel for either. I am going to have to back the home side Bromley here. I think they've got a bit more League Two experience. A team with a great squad and great bit of know-how. I'm going to go 2-0 to Bromley. Cheltenham Town versus Chesterfield. Now, I do think Chesterfield are probably going to win the title. Maybe that was my optimism or whatever, but they did win the open game of the season. They will hit ruts along the way, though. I think a team like Cheltenham are absolutely horrible to watch at times. They are dogged and determined, and I think they can dig in. They're at home as well at Warden Road. I'm just going to go 1-0 win for the Robins. But I hope Chesterfield prove me wrong and win this one. I just think some of Chesterfield's style will be countered quite effectively by Cheltenham. Crawley Town versus Newport County. Both of these teams had a rubbish season last season round, and Crawley started this season dreadfully as well. I think they're going to need to hit back at this one at home, and I fully expect them to do so against this Newport side. 4-1 to Crawley Town. Crewe Alexandra versus Accrington Stanley. Accrington Stanley? Who are they? Exactly. Now, Crewe started the season really well, actually. An opening day 3-1 win against Salford City. A real sort of blueprint, if you will, for how they will probably want the season to pan out. Whether that's the case, I'm not entirely convinced. Accrington Stanley started the season with a draw, but they did have an EFL Cup game midweek where they ran out 3-1 winners of Oldham, and that could have provided a bit of a spark. I mean, lineup-wise for Accrington Stanley didn't have full of first teams. They did have some youngsters in there, but they're a side that I think is they're definitely one of them ones that have both have done actually League One seasons recently. I think Accrington Stanley to win this one 1-0. Fleetwood versus Bristol Rovers. So Bristol Rovers, poor opening day of the season. They were pretty bad last season towards the tail end of it. They're up against the Fleetwood side, which is really a tough place to go. But Fleetwood have a good start of the season. I think Fleetwood might do quite well this season. I'm going a 0-0 draw here. I think a lot of the games that you see at Fleetwood Stadium, Highbury, isn't it, tend to be quite boring and dull. But it gets the job done. Gillingham versus Warsaw. Both of these teams, I think, were solid at times in their opening game and fixture. I think Warsaw dropped away a bit last season. I'm going to go with a 0-0 draw here. I think Gillingham are rugged and determined, and they will just provide an obstacle that Warsaw will not be able to surmount. Harrogate Town versus Grimsby Town. Harrogate are, well, they started really well this season, as did Grimsby. Both did a phenomenal job on their opening day of the season. I think Grimsby might be challenging again for playoffs. I just don't see the same for Harrogate. I think they're more likely to be involved in relegation scrap. But we're looking at this game in isolation here, and I am actually going to go with a 2-2 draw. Both came flying out of the gates at the start of the season. We may see them settling down in a few weeks' time, but at the moment, they've got that start of the season zit about them. Oldham Athletic versus Colchester United. We saw Colchester last season drastically improving. I think they can well and truly continue that, actually. And I think it's a good opportunity to do so against an Oldham side that are still finding their feet a bit at this level after a bit of an absence. And I'm going to have to back Colchester to win 2-1 in this game. Swindon Town versus Cambridge United. I mean, I don't think it would be unfair to say that Swindon may be coming in as a bit of an underdogs at this one. But I think Swindon proved themselves last season, actually, as quite the surprise package. I'm going to go with a 4-0 win for Swindon Town, which is quite a mad shout, to be honest. But I think Cambridge have become a bit mid-table last season, and you can see why. On to the National League, Altrincham versus Aldershot Town. So both of these teams within recent history have been playoff challengers, but also facing down the wrong way of the table as well. So it's really topsy-turvy ones to predict off the bat here. I think Aldershot might win this one. 2-1. I'm going to go overall. And I think Aldershot will score one more goal. I can't entirely tell you why. I just think they will. Boreham Wood versus Rochdale. Boreham Wood back in the National League. Rochdale will have aspirations of promotion, I imagine, this season because they've been in this league for far too long. But I think Boreham Wood is a difficult opening day of the season. They have the wind behind their sails when they got promoted last season. They've had some good cup runs of late, and I think they're back to their old manager who guided them to so much success. We're going with a 1-1 draw here. Brackley Town versus Eastleigh. Brackley were knocking and weren't able to get past that obstacle, and now that they finally have done, let's see what they're all about, shall we? A team which have been stuck in the National League North for an age now, regularly having playoff heartbreak, but no such thing as a playoff last season. They actually secured the title in a dramatic last day of the season. I'm going to say this opening game of the season for them going into a pretty boring 0-0 draw, but I'm interested to see what Brackley can do now that they're at this level. Braintree Town versus FC Halifax Town. I was amazed that Braintree managed to completely clear themselves of any relegation fears, to be honest, last season, because you looked at the size of the club and whatever, and you thought, well, we have instantly a team which you would pinpoint for relegation. And they're up against a Halifax Town team which were in the playoff last season. They've been in and around that for the last few seasons now. But I'm going to back Braintree. Home advantage. A solitary 0-0 that Braintree will win by. Gateshead versus Southend United. I once saw a Gateshead v Southend game at one point. The only things I particularly remember from that was that Southend had a really good turnout, but it was a while ago now. It was about 2 or 3 seasons ago. Gateshead Stadium is one of them ones. It's a really big pitch, unlike Route 4, which is quite where supporters are quite close to the action stuff. You've got Gateshead millions of miles away, but because it's an accustomed setting that Gateshead are used to, I think we're going to see a 0-0 draw. I think both of these could potentially have a playoff charge, or both could potentially have a really disappointing season, because both have had that recently in recent history. So it's hard to pinpoint this season. Solihull Moors versus Forest Green Rovers. Derby had the privilege of playing both in pre-season. Forest Green Rovers behind closed doors, and Solihull Moors not behind closed doors. And 2 absolutely wonder goals by Solihull Moors, which I don't think they'll ever be able to replicate, and I don't think they're going to replicate in this game here, to be honest. Forest Green Rovers are a side that are looking for promotion. I think that's fair to say. I'm going to back Forest Green Rovers to win this one by 1-0. Tamworth versus Scunthorpe United. Scunthorpe United will want to make it back-to-back promotions. They're up against a difficult side in Tamworth, though, who surprised, I think, a lot of people last season, well, not myself, in terms of how brilliant they were. Their points to total sort of implied they would have potentially been in a playoff push. I don't think they ever really were. I think this will be an interesting one. I do think Scunthorpe are going to start the season very well, and I'm going to back Scunthorpe to win this one by 2-1. Wealdstone versus Truro City. Well, welcome Truro City to the National League. They have had a whirlwind of the past 20 years or so, haven't they? And this is the highest that a Cornish team has ever been up the pyramid. And I alas think away journeys, I think they may get battered a bit away, but at home they can become a bit of a fortress. So for that reason, because it's at Wealdstone's ground, I'm going to go 3-0 to Wealdstone, because I do think they'll improve from last season as well. Woking versus Carlisle United. Really interesting seeing Carlisle in the National League now. Have they been in the National League before? I'm not sure, but they're a team who have a long-standing history in the Football League. Well, only relatively recently in League One. So they'll be wanting to get an instant promotion back against a Woking side, which, let's be honest, isn't the most glamorous of opening fixtures. They have completely sold out their away allocation, Carlisle fans, and there probably will be some in the home end as well. I'm going to go with a 5-1 win for Carlisle United here against Woking. I just think there's nothing that Woking can do to prevent it. Yeovil Town versus Hartlepool United. An interesting one, certainly, in terms of both of these teams were a bit mid-table last season, and probably also expectations of playoffs. I think Hartlepool are going to win this one, 1-0. But I think it will be it's a long distance for Hartlepool fans to make, and the playoffs, of course. And I just feel it will be a very close and cagey game. York City versus Sutton United. York did well last season, but they just had a few hiccups. And is that going to play on their minds come this opening day of the season? I think so. I think Sutton will win this one 2-1. The quicker they put that aside, though, the stronger they will be. But they've got to get that mental blip behind them. On to the National League North, got Bedford Town versus Alfreton Town. Bedford Town, new National League North newcomers. I think they'll do all right at home. I think away they could be exposed a bit, and I think they're one of them ones which, as the season drags on, they will sort of be dragged into a relegation battle. But I think up against Alfreton, which I don't think are a side that they looked to shell of themselves last season, and a lot of people are quite optimistic about Alfreton, including myself, making a return back to the heights that they reached before, because I think they have done some good, savvy pre-season signings. signed some of the trialists. I thought they were really good against the game. I saw them in Doncaster Rovers in pre-season. But yeah, I'm going to go with a 0-0 draw in this one. I just think Bedford will try and provide an obstacle, which may at this point be a bit too much to overcome. I just think later season, Bedford will not be looking as great. I just think early doors, they'll do all right. Buxton v Radcliffe. Buxton, let's be honest, Buxton reached playoffs completely against everyone's expectations last season. Now, obviously, they didn't win the playoffs, hence why we're still in National League North. Do we expect them to do the same this season? I don't know. And to be brutally honest, I think there's been some interesting changes at the club in terms of playing staff. Radcliffe, I'm going to go with a 1-0 win. They're not too far away from each other. And I certainly think Radcliffe will do a bit better than last season, possibly. Will they still be looking down barrel of gun? I'm not sure. Chester versus Peterborough Sports. Chester, outside shout for a title, maybe. I mean, I made predictions, and I don't think I said I was going to back Chester for the title. But I do think they are a good quality squad at the Diva Stadium as well against the Peterborough Sports side, which never quite seem to have enough to make the playoffs. I'm going to go with a 3-0 win for Chester. Curzon Ashton versus Leamington. Curzon Ashton were a bit of a roller coaster last season. At some point, they looked like they were going to be playoff contenders, and then they faded away, and then they decided that they were going to try and go for a late charge. Leamington were just flat, nothing in it really. I'm going to go with a 1-0 draw in this one. On to Darlington versus Chorley. I think both of these teams probably have playoff aspirations. Darlington haven't quite managed to get to that point in recent history, but they're at home. I'm going to have a 1-0 draw in this tie. It'll be an interesting one. AFC Fylde versus Oxford City. Fylde back in the National League North. They have become the epitome of a yo-yo club, haven't they? And justifiably so, to be honest. They're not good enough in the National League, but they're all right in the National League North. And I think against a team for Oxford City, which are a long way to travel, a team which looked quite out of sorts last season at times, I'm going to have to go 2-1 to Fylde. Kidderminster Harriers versus Scarborough Athletic at the Agborough Stadium. Scarborough are a team which I think will slightly decrease on last season. I think we're still going to see a mid-table finish, but maybe not as good as it was last time. And I think Kidderminster Harriers, I think I said they were going to win the title. I can't remember now. It was a few weeks ago now. But I do think Kidderminster Harriers are going to be certainly very good this season. 3-0 to the Harriers. Kings Lynn Town versus AFC Telford United. Well, Telford are back. But they've got a hard opening day of the season. There is no denying it. They're up against Kings Lynn Town team, which are definitely looking for playoffs as a bare minimum, I would say. And I think the Linnets at home will send Telford to the cleaners here. 3-0. Macclesfield versus Worksop Town. I'm not entirely sure how either of these are going to do. I've seen Worksop before, and they're quite a nice team to watch play. And I think Macclesfield were quite similar under Robbie Savage. So I think both of these are teams that do like to play a bit of football. I think we are looking at it at Macclesfield's ground. I think early doors that win for Macclesfield, as they certainly have. They dominated, didn't they, the Northern Premier League last season. So yeah, 3-1 to Macclesfield. Merthyr Town versus Southport. It's a long way for any team to go to Merthyr Town. I think Southport, especially a team which hasn't really reached them heights, which I think maybe some of us expected over recent years. I know a 0-0 draw here. A pretty boring opening game of the season, I will say. But I do think it's one of them ones that resilience defence-wise, maybe Merthyr's saving grace this season. South Shields versus Marine. South Shields, I think, were poor at parts last season, and they're going to want to put that right this season, and we're better to start against a Marine side, which I don't think we're too great last season either, to be honest. But I do think South Shields is a slightly bigger club. We're going to back the South Shields side to win by 2-0. Spennymoor Town versus Hereford. I think both of these have an outside shout for the playoffs this season, quite possibly. I think Spennymoor's pitch is one of them ones which often gets remarked upon by the National League North of not being really the most conducive to playing style. And I think we're going to see a pretty scrappy game and a 0-0 draw. Onto the National League South, we've got Chelmsford City versus Horsham. This is the highest that Horsham have ever been. And to be honest, I have no idea what to expect of them coming into this season. So I'm going to go with a 0-0 draw here, travelling to Chelmsford, because I think Chelmsford have recently been backsliding, to be honest, in terms of they've previously been in playoff pushes and we're mid-table last season. I think they have started slowly regressing. So yeah, a 0-0 draw. Chippenham Town hosting Dorking Wanderers. I think everybody will say that Dorking certainly have a chance to be a team to claim the title this season. I think it would be pretty stupid not to. And especially when your opening day of the seasons against a Chippenham Town team, which is just so mid-table. I'm going to have to go Dorking to win this one. I can't see any of the results. 2-1 to Dorking Wanderers. Two of the relegated teams from the National League. We've got Dagenham and Redbridge hosting Ebbsfleet United. I mean, to see Dagenham and Redbridge in the National League South, that is a real shame, to be honest. Dagenham and Redbridge, I remember it was back in like FIFA 15 days when you take over Dagenham and Redbridge and transform them from a lower league table in League 2 to winning the Champions League. And it was one of the ones which you'd use as your save and stuff, a road to victory, so to speak. And they're hosting Ebbsfleet, which were pretty dire last season. I'm going to have to back the Daggers to win this one. 1-0. Dover Athletic versus AFC Toten. Another team, but both of these teams were promoted last season, but we have seen Dover at this level before. But I have no idea about Toten. I'm going to be brutally honest. Maybe I need to do a bit of homework and look a bit around about them. But I just think they're one of them teams that I did not expect to be promoted, and I'm going to go with a 0-0 draw at the Crabble. Farnborough versus Eastbourne Borough. Now, a lot of people, I think, will probably put Eastbourne in that bracket of potential title challengers, probably top 3 finishers. A bad season would be in the play, like bottom towards playoffs, or just missing out on the playoffs, and a horrendous season would be mid-table. But I think Farnborough actually looked at spells last season quite decent, and I think opening doors, I think we are going to see Farnborough win this one by 2-0. Hampton and Richmond Borough versus Salisbury. I'm sorry, but Salisbury were just poor last season. I'm going to have to go Hampton and Richmond Borough to win this one. 1-0. Hemel Hempstead Town versus Maidstone United. It's an interesting one, these two teams, because you've got Hemel Hempstead, who have been a bit mid-table last season. They were in relegation threatened the season before. Maidstone have been absolutely flying of late, but alas, no cigar. I think we may see a 0-0 draw, the Tudors holding out, being just quite rigid and determined and acting more like the away side, maybe. Hornchurch versus Weston-super-Mare. Weston-super-Mare were superb last season in parts, in terms of they were knocking on the doors of the playoffs, and they weren't quite good enough to get there, but certainly were a side which fills me with optimism for this season. Travelling to Hornchurch, which I don't think were the greatest team on paper last season. I'm going to go 4-2 to Weston-super-Mare. Maynard United versus Chesham United. It's a difficult one. One of these teams got relegated, one of them's got promoted. I'm going to go with a 0-0 draw. They're both quite close to each other geographically, actually, but have never really had any interactions, with Maidenhead being typically a National League team for the past sort of 5 to 10 years now, and Chesham more being a side in the Southern League more recently, and maybe even down to Tier 8. I can't quite recall. A 0-0 draw, I think, on this one. I'm not entirely sure what to expect from Chesham at the moment. Tunbridge Angels versus Slough Town. I think both of these teams were poor last season. I think when they were in low mid-table, slight threat of relegation, although never anything serious. And I think we may end up seeing at least one of these two teams possibly relegated this season. I'm going to go Tunbridge Angels to win this one, 3-1. Torquay United versus Enfield Town. Enfield Town had the miraculous recovery last season, and they enabled themselves to claw themselves to safety when they looked down and buried and for so long. They are travelling to play more against Torquay on the opening day of the season, which I don't think anybody would particularly want, with Torquay having lofty aspirations. I don't think I back Torquay to do as well this season. And got in a bit of trouble in the comments section for that on my predictions. But I'm going to back Torquay to win this one. 2-1. Worthing versus Bath City. Worthing have been in the playoffs the last couple of seasons now. I'm really impressed, actually, by where that club is going. Bath, opposite story, to be honest. They've been floating down the table. They're going the other direction. And I'm going to have to back Worthing to win this one 2-1. We've got the FA Community Shield as well, actually. Completely forgot about that. We've got Crystal Palace versus Liverpool. Is this game as important as it was historically? Maybe not, but I think Crystal Palace is certainly a team which will be wanting to win this one, adding a bit of silverware. I think Liverpool may use this as a final pre-season sort of run out and experiment a bit with what their starting 11 could look like on the opening day. So I do think Liverpool win this one, but I don't think it'll be an easy game by any stretch of the imagination. 1-0 to Liverpool. Leicester City versus Sheffield Wednesday is also on the Sunday. Now, I feel sorry for any Wednesday fans out there. I know there's one at least who watches my channel. And it's a dreadful situation going on. And you've got a horrible opening day of the season. Credit where it's credit's due. You've packed out the away end completely, over 3,000 away fans in the King Power Stadium. I'm going to have to back Leicester, though. 2-0 to the Foxes. I just don't see Sheffield Wednesday doing much this season at all. On to the EFL Cup ones. What Swansea City versus Crawley Town. This is an interesting one. Because Crawley, I think, are going to come and cause an upset. And I think they may just do it. I think they may initially start quite well. And then Swansea come back into it. And I think Swansea are going to win this one 3-2. Barrow versus Preston North End. Again, another potential opportunity for an upset here. But I just think Preston... I think Preston this season will say that mid-table is a good season, right? But that isn't particularly exciting, right? So what they really need is a good cup run. And I think this might provide an opportunity. 2-0 to Preston North End. Middlesbrough versus Doncaster Rovers. Two Yorkshire sides. I think Doncaster Rovers are actually a team that... And I think both of these teams might try and have eyes on playoffs, so to speak. But I think it's at the Riverside, and I just think Middlesbrough will take this game quite seriously, unlike some. 4-0 to Borough. Newport County versus Millwall. Well, we know that Millwall were knocked out of the FA Cup a few seasons back by Boreham Wood, no less. And Newport County have been well known for being giant killers in cup competitions in recent years, haven't they? So you've got to say Newport County at home at Rodney Parade. They're going to win this one. 3-2 to the Exiles in the second upset of this cup competition. Stockport County versus Crewe Alexandra. I think Stockport main focus will be another playoff finish this season. I don't think they'll be as bothered about the EFL Cup, especially against a Crewe side, which maybe have half an eye on the playoffs, but I think we'll take this game quite seriously as well. 3-1 to Crewe Alexandra. Accrington Stanley versus Peterborough United. Peterborough will just need something to prove themselves. As I've already said, I think there's going to be a draw in their opening game of the season. Their second game of the season, they lost the first one. They're going to need some win. This could come in the EFL Cup, rather. A 2-1 win to Peterborough United here. Blackburn Rovers versus Bradford City. I think Bradford will be focused a bit on the league. Blackburn, typically, historically, I think, have taken this competition a bit more seriously. And I'm going to go with Blackburn to win this one at Ewood Park. 2-0 to Rovers. Blackpool versus Port Vale. An interesting one. I think both these teams quite resilient in the defence, so to speak. And I think both of them will see this as an opportunity to get some much needed publicity. I think it's going to be a 0-0 draw and Port Vale, no less, to win on penalties. Bristol City versus MK Dons. I'm going to think that Paul Warne is going to need a win. But he's up against a Bristol City side, so that's difficult as is. Because Bristol City are, and it's away as well. I think they will come and scrap and battle, and I think it will be a 1-1 draw. But I think Bristol City will win on penalties. Bristol Rovers versus Cambridge United. This is just a boring League Two match, and I don't think many people will be too bothered about this. I think overall Bristol Rovers will win this one by 2-0. Cardiff City versus Swindon Town. Cardiff don't have great depth options. I addressed that in my League One predictions. And but they'll be wanting to try and protect some of their assets. So may have some quite inexperienced youngsters playing, possibly, up against a Swindon Town team, though, which I don't think is the greatest either. I'm going to go with a 1-1 draw, and I think they will bring on some experienced heads to try and get through the tie, Cardiff, and they'll win on penalties. Charlton Athletic versus Stevenage. I don't see why Charlton won't take this competition seriously, to be honest, and I think they will beat Stevenage here. 2-0 to Charlton Athletic. Chesterfield v Mansfield Town. Bit of a local derby, this one actually, and not the Derbyshire. Now, I do wish the Derbyshire team incredibly well in this one, and I hope they win, hands down. But we know that Nigel Clough he loves this competition. He took Burton Albion to the semi-finals of this competition back in 2018-19, managed to get absolutely battered by Manchester City. But to reach the semi-finals with Burton Albion, no less, that's still an impressive feat. And only a couple of seasons back, reached the fourth round with Mansfield. So I know he loves a cup run in this competition. I'm just going to say Mansfield to win this one, 1-0. Coventry City versus Luton Town. Well, I also happen to know that Frank Lampard likes the EFL Cup because he managed to get us. He managed to beat Manchester United actually to then play against Chelsea in the EFL Cup when he was with Derby. And that was, I think, the last time we actually had a good EFL Cup run. It's a difficult one though because they're up against a Luton Town team, which winning breeds winning, and I think are wanting to have a scalp and prove themselves up against a team in the league above. I just think Coventry will win this one though. 3-2 to Coventry City. Gillingham versus Wimbledon, a League Two versus a League One club. I just feel like the League Two one have home advantage at Priestfield, and then haven't really got much aspiration in terms of league finishing, possibly, when we're up against a Wimbledon team which is aiming to stay up and maybe viewing the cup as a bit of a distraction. I think we're going to see Gillingham win this one by 1-0. Grimsby Town versus Shrewsbury Town. I'm not going to lie, I'm not being convinced yet on Shrewsbury in League Two. I think we'll have a 0-0 draw, and I think Grimsby Town to win on penalties. Harrogate Town versus Lincoln City. I think we could definitely see an upset in this one, to be honest. Lincoln, I think, will be more focused on the league, possibly. I think Harrogate, what's there to lose? It's an upset. It potentially means that they can be at home to like a team like Leeds United or something like that, which would do huge revenue boosts for the club. So yeah, I'm going to go Harrogate to win this one by 2-1. Leyton Orient versus Wycombe Wanderers. I think neither of these teams are too bothered about going deep into the cup competition this year. I'm going to go with a 1-0 win for Leyton Orient. Northampton Town versus Southampton, the Battle of the Hamptons. And I'm going to say that Northampton will fight, but I just don't rate their quality at all. And I even think Southampton's backup squad could probably beat Northampton. I'm going to go 3-2 to Southampton. Oxford United versus Colchester United. I think this is going to be a major shock in this one. I think Colchester will win this one by 1-0. I don't know why. I just think it's going to be a scrappy, one of your typical cup ties where against run of play and everything, Colchester win it. Plymouth Argyle versus Queen's Park Rangers. A long trip midweek for QPR to make down to the southwest. And it is one of the ones which is a difficult place to go. But Plymouth, I think, will be more focused on promotion. And I think QPR, they're a bit of a mid-table side, let's be honest. And I think an EFL Cup run will do them well. 1-0 to Queen's Park Rangers. Portsmouth versus Reading. Fratton Park is a viscerous... Is it visceral? I can never remember how you pronounce this word. They're at home up against Reading. Reading, I think, maybe wanting playoffs. I think Portsmouth, well, I'm not going to reveal too much about my predictions, but I think I'm going to do all right this season. I'm going to go good win for Pompey, 4-1. Salford City versus Rotherham United. Salford, I think, could be a bit of a thorn for Rotherham here. Matt Hamshaw still finding his feet. 1-0 draw and Salford to win on penalties. Stoke City versus Walsall. Certainly think Walsall will be wanting to come in and prove themselves as an upset here. There's a bit of a local needle within this one. A lot of teams, a lot of football fans in that sort of South Staffordshire area, your sort of areas around about Stafford, split. Do they go Walsall? Do they go Stoke? Do they go Burton area? So I think there is a bit of local pride potentially on stake, but it's at the Bet365. You just got to back Stoke in this situation because I don't think in the league they've got much to play for. 3-1 Stoke City. And we do know that Mark Robbins does love a cup run as well, considering what he did with Coventry in the FA Cup recently. Tranmere Rovers versus Burton Albion. Now, Burton, as we already mentioned, do like cup runs, but that was under a different managerial regime. And they are going to Prenton Park, home of Tranmere. I think Tranmere may just cause a bit of an upset. The BBC Radio Derby Burton Albion commentator is actually a Tranmere fan, so that'll be an interesting one to see how that plays out on the commentary duties. So Dave Fletcher, I think it is, yeah. And Tranmere Rovers, I'm going to go to win this one, 2-1. Watford v Norwich City. Don't think either of these are too bothered about this. 1-0 Norwich. West Bromwich Albion versus Derby County away. So we actually played them in the EFL Cup only 2 seasons ago. It wasn't even that long ago, or maybe even last season. No, it wasn't last season, certainly. It was when we were in League One, I think, and we provided a bit of a shock and beat West Brom. We always do well against West Brom. We are their bogey side. I remember against when we went to the Hawthorns, and it was that sort of fight or die sort of attitude that we had when we needed to go there, and we got all 3 points. And I think that was at that point, I think that took us out of the relegation zone by 3 points or whatever. And I actually had belief that we could start staying up this season. Or re-belief, sort of one of them things. So yeah, I think Derby County have got a bit of West Brom's number, and I'm not sure if Eustace likes the EFL Cup or not. I've never experienced him with it. I don't think Blackburn and Birmingham have had notable spells in the past, but yeah, let's why not? 3-1 Derby. I don't back Derby enough on this channel, I don't think. Wigan Athletic versus Notts County. I think we're going to see a cheeky Notts County upset here. 2-0 to Notts County against Wigan. Wrexham versus Hull. Both of I think Wrexham will play their weaker team. I don't think Hull have a weaker team, to be honest. I go a 2-2 draw, and I go Hull City to win on penalties. Because Wrexham have so much of a bloated squad as well. Bromley versus Ipswich. This is a really hard one to tell. I think Bromley did all right in the FA Cup last season, if I'm not wrong. I certainly remember watching them on the telly. And they were up against Ipswich, a really difficult one. Home advantage, I think it's going to be a 0-0 draw and Ipswich to win on penalties. Barnsley versus Fleetwood Town. I think Fleetwood may come looking for an upset here. I think we're going to see a bit of a dogfight altogether, a 2-2 draw, and I'm going to go with Barnsley to win on penalties. Bolton Wanderers versus Sheffield Wednesday. I actually think Sheffield Wednesday need the money, so they need a good cup run. And I think that's Bolton are more going to be focused on promotion. I'm going to go Sheffield Wednesday to win this one. And the silver lining of their season, potentially, a 2-0 win for Sheffield Wednesday. Cheltenham Town versus Exeter City. An interesting one. I just think Exeter will win this one. I think if these two teams are very capable of doing a good cup run, because they're not going to have any necessary distractions, so to speak. But yeah, 2-1 Exeter. Huddersfield Town versus Leicester City. I'm going to have to back Leicester to win this one, even though Huddersfield will try to form an upset at John Smith Stadium. I'm going to go 1-0 to Leicester City. And the final prediction, Birmingham City versus Sheffield United. Probably both their B teams, to be honest. But I might do a live watch-along of this one, actually. It's on a Wednesday evening. I don't think I'm doing anything that night. So I'm going to... We'll give it a live watch-along, shall we? I've not done a live watch-along for some league clubs in a while. And I do enjoy doing them. I just... yeah, I'm going to go Sheffield United to back them to win this one. 2-1. Anyway, thank you very much for watching this video. Please subscribe if you enjoy it. If you're new around here, we're only 9 subscribers away from the big 200. And I'm coming back with my Championship League predictions tonight. Martin and I, you haven't done your Championship predictions. I will be doing that tonight. You tune in, probably about 6:30. I'm aware. I'm doing it the other way around. So confusing you a bit. But yeah, I saw that RIP Terry Hennessy, my father's favourite player. Yeah, great. Somebody who was a bit more rotational player, if I'm right saying, in terms of when Derby won that league title of the first division back in the 1970, 71, 72 season. Wednesday night, good afternoon to you too. Oh, nice. I'm actually going to that League Cup match against Bolton Wanderers, so it'd be nice to see us win. Lol. I mean, you're not going to get many wins this season, so you may be able to get one against a team in the league below. So enjoy it if you're going out for that game. I hope for your sake you come back with progression in the Cup. But yes, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you all either tonight for my predictions or whenever you choose to turn in. Maybe it's for live stream I've promised for the watch along. But goodbye for now.